So you don't know. I don't know if you know this or not, but Blake Budabaker is like my favorite.
Is he? Well, he's kind of our favorite too.
Yeah, I like. I have this theory. I've had this theory for a long time that positionless football is eventually going to be a thing, right? Where you're just going to draft people and you're going to say he's talented, get him on the field.
Mhm.
And Buda Baker is really the first person that I remember being like, it's him. Like, what position does
Mhm.
he play? Like, what can he do? And you're like, everything.
What can he do? Yes.
Yeah, just put him out there. So,
Just hope they're not
anyways,
Isaiah Simmons.
yeah, well,
That one
there's
didn't work
that.
out so well.
Yeah. Welcome everybody back to my 32 fan series. This is where I talk to every fan from each 32 team. This has actually become one of my favorite things. I do it. This is year 3 in the summer, and it's just nice because this is freshly off the draft. Everyone's super happy, I feel like, right after the draft. Middle of May, everyone starts to kind of get a little annoyed because now they're like, they've realized football's, it's over. Now we just have to schedule. Now we have to wait. So that is why I do this. So obviously you can tell on the screen, we're talking about the Arizona Cardinals. And yeah, let's just get into it. If you want to introduce yourself, let us know how long you've been a fan, anything you really want us to know just about you and being an Arizona Cardinals fan.
Yeah, my name's Joseph Camo or Joe Camo, and you see my Twitter handle I've got in there, Joe Camo13. I was born in Arizona. I've lived in other places, California, Texas. I now reside in Georgia. Professionally, I'm a academic, and my career brought me here. But I started creating content to follow the Cardinals about 5 years ago or so, just as a way to engage with the team that I love. I lived in Arizona when they moved there in 1988 because I am old. So I have, I was early teenager. I was a fan, but didn't understand football as much, didn't follow it as closely. But over the years, I followed it more and more. And then in the 90s and late 90s, I really started enjoying the draft. And the NFL draft is kind of this is the kind of nerd I am. It's my favorite sporting event of the year, even though it's not the actual games. But I love the NFL draft. There's everything about the analysis, the excitement about it's like my Christmas. Now people call it Draftmas. I have a friend named Mike who texts me every year. I've known Mike for 20-something years, and every year he texts me Merry Christmas on the NFL draft because he knows what it means to me. Yeah. So I've been a Cardinals fan forever. And just have had the joy of doing a little bit of content, getting to know other content creators and talking about a team that a long-suffering relationship I've had with them. They are why did I have to get saddled with this team, right? Is something I ask myself regularly and repeatedly. But it's for me, it's sort of an identity thing. It's a connection to my place of birth. And I think about sports fandom and love sports fandom as a thing. It's something that's supposed to bring us joy. And I'm very agnostic about it in terms of whatever works for you. Like, I'm not going to tell you how to be a fan. Just let other people be a fan the way they want. And for me, it's a thing that represents my home state.
Okay. I love that. How are you feeling right now about the Cardinals? There's new coach, new quarterback, almost new. How are you feeling right now as a Cardinals fan, freshly off the draft? Like, where's your headspace at with the team? How are you feeling?
Boy, it could very ambivalent. It can go in a lot of different ways. There's some things I'm very excited about and potentially optimistic about, and other things I'm not so much. We've got a brand new coach, right? Mike LaFleur, who, he had a stint as an offensive coordinator for the Jets, didn't do a whole lot there, but we saw who they had at quarterback while he was there.
Yeah.
That was not a good situation. Now he has come through, being with Sean McVay, which offensive coordinators from Sean McVay have a very good history of being successful as head coaches.
Sure.
So, a lot of people were down on the hire. He was some people even said it was the worst hire of the cycle. I don't think that's fair, but he's a young offensive minded head coach. And that is a blueprint that does work a lot, right? A lot of times it doesn't always work, but in the situation we were in with our ownership, that was probably the best we could do. So it's a high variance, high risk, high reward kind of situation because that kind of coach can really just become the guy, but it might not work with the organization. So I'm optimistic about some of those things that we're probably going to have a better offense going on, but I'm also, the ownership we'll talk about that later. And, we don't have the quarterback situation settled at this point. This was not a good draft to be picking number 3, needing a quarterback.
Right.
I'm sure we'll get into that more. so there's good and bad. There are things I like about what they're doing on the roster in terms of building it. There's some young players I like, but we're also in the toughest division in football. We had both championship teams in our division, and the third team that wasn't there was the 49ers, who they're up and down, but when they're high, they're Super Bowl contenders. So
if you like the content that you're getting, don't forget to hit that like button. Leave us a comment in the comment section below, and I'll let you get back to your video.
That's how I feel.
That's it. We got a little bit of work to do. Okay. Yeah. So what is one word you would use to describe the draft?
I wrestled with this one. It was satisficing. Which is kind of to me, that's kind of doing what you can, making the best in kind of a weird situation. This was a really weird draft class at multiple levels. The top of the draft class, the best players were non-premium position players. Well, and obviously the Cardinals took a player who some people think was the best player in the draft, but was a non-premium position. And there's been a lot of, I've even talked about, great player, bad process, right? But like, what was the better alternative? I think trading back and getting more draft cap, getting a tackle, and then adding some picks might have been the better play. But this was such a weird draft, and I don't know that they had offers. So on the top of the draft class, it was weird because we needed a quarterback, and you'd think if you're picking number 3 in most years, you're going to be able to get a quarterback there, right? There's going to be someone, and there just wasn't that anyone worth it.
Yeah.
So, but then you get to the back end, and a lot of people talked about how this draft class was also like a lot of players on day 3 were guys that would have been UDFAs. It was just weird because the NIL kind of adjustment, a lot of players that would have come out went back. And I was talking about this last night, my live stream, and, I generally, and people will have different opinions. I'm supportive of college players getting compensated. Programs make tons of money, and players are branded for that. So I have no problem with it. But objectively speaking, there's a structural thing that happens where right now I feel like we're in this liminal transition period where because it's new, we're still in that point where players who would have been coming out are going back. But it will eventually catch up to itself because those players do eventually come out. And there's just this period of adjustment. But once that adjustment happens, then we'll have a cycle where they come out instead of their second year in the third or fourth year. Our draft classes will be older. But once that adjusts, the talent level will kind of rebalance, right? It'll 100%. Find equilibrium again. But this is a draft class that I think was affected by that transition period, which means it was diluted, right? So on the back end, you're having to make some weird, like we went for a guy who was, I think, really focused as a special teams contributor in round, I think, 6, rather than
waited to.
Yeah. And so it was like the point I'm really making is that this was a suboptimal situation for the Cardinals. It was a weird draft class at the top. They needed a quarterback. It was not a good draft to get a quarterback. They took one later, obviously. So it was weird at pick 3 what to do. And then even later, it was kind of weird. So I feel like they were in a tough spot. And, some people have been critical of it, but I do think they probably made about the best they could of a rough situation.
That's fair. Okay. Is there anybody that you all got on day 2 or day 3 that you think is going to be a steal?
Yeah, I think Caleb Proctor, the defensive tackle out of southeastern Louisiana, who we took in round 4 at pick 104. Okay. He's a twitchy, undersized defensive tackle, and those guys who are really athletic and twitchy but a little undersized, there's a track record of some of those guys being successful. Obviously, the archetype is Aaron Donald, and he's not Aaron Donald. Aaron Donald is an alien, right? But there's guys like Milton Williams and Kobe Turner who more recently have been that sort of bill or that sort of profile. Caleb Proctor did not do the bench press, which is telling that he's probably did not do well in that. And the scouting report suggests the strength is near where he needs to grow. So he'll need to get into the weight room to kind of develop, because there's also another guy who fits that profile who hasn't been so good, and that's Kalijah Cansey. And he was also small, twitchy, athletic, but not as strong. Proctor has longer arms than Cansey, so that works in his favor. But I think this is a guy who, if he gets in there, gets in the weight room, can be a disruptive guy. And Milton Williams and Kobe Turner, those would be some really, if he's somewhere in that range, that would be a really awesome outcome for that pick.
Okay, fair enough. Who's the one player in your draft class that you think will make the biggest impact, like the biggest immediate impact?
I mean, it's hard to argue anyone other than Jeremiah Love, right? I mean,
Okay.
running backs in the draft, like in this, process wise, taking them early, there's a lot of reasons for not doing that, especially when you're a team that doesn't have your quarterback and you're kind of squandering their prime years.
Yeah.
But I mean, running backs in the first round have one of the highest success rates in terms of not being a bust. They come in and they're good, like at just such a high rate, and they're immediately good. Like
Yeah.
the learning, like in fact, sometimes the rookie year is the best year of their career sometimes. So objectively speaking, it would like hard to argue that anyone other than Jeremiah Love. In fact, he might have the most impact of any rookie in the draft class of any team, just in terms of being a guy who comes in and is immediately a star on his team.
I think that's fair. I think that's fair. I like Jeremiah Love. You're right though. The Cardinals were in a weird, very weird situation. My dad would say, "Damned if you do, damned if you don't."
Yeah.
So that's kind of where that is. Is there a player that you all passed on multiple times that you think will come back to haunt you, or a player that you were kind of watching and you were like, "Get him this time, please,"
Yeah.
and then somebody finally got him?
Yeah, in fact, he's a player that if we would have got him to draft him, we would have had to take him in the same place where we took Caleb Proctor, the defensive tackle I talked about. And that'd be Keontae Scott, defensive back out of Miami. He went in round 4, pick 116 by Tampa Bay. I did a lot of kind of research of the Cardinals in terms of their roster needs, but also who they had 30 visits with and meetings with at the combine and things like that. And I did a mock draft that I published as a video, my kind of predictive mock draft. And one of the themes that really came out was that they were meeting with a lot of defensive backs who are kind of slot safety, big nickel kind of hybrid guys. And, we lost Jalen Thompson as a free agent. He went to the Dallas Cowboys, who, excuse me, filled that role for us. So that's kind of a need on our roster. Our slot cornerback situation have some guys who've been injured. So I just was really compelled and persuaded that the Cardinals were going to take someone, Traden Stukes, Keontae Scott, Jalen Kilgore, someone of that mold, because they met with all those guys and a few more. And, Traden Stukes went in round 2. He went a little earlier than I thought he would, but he's a great player. He's a guy I had mocked to the Cardinals in round 3. And then so Keontae Scott sitting around is kind of the next guy up for me. And we pass on him, and we bet to take the quarterback back, and we pass on him again for Caleb Proctor. And we did not end up taking someone that fits that profile in the draft, even though we met with multiple of them. It's kind of a need. So, it's a position that he'll perhaps haunt us because we're going to have kind of a hole in that spot, going to need someone there, and we could have had him.
Yeah. I wish somebody did a study with how many. I feel like that happens a lot where you have the 30 visits and everyone thinks one thing. And then after you look at the draft, you're like, wait a minute, they didn't, they didn't do any of this stuff. Yeah. So, okay. So what would success look like for you all this year? Like, how are you thinking? What are you feeling? Like, what is something that you're right? The division is tough and you all are at a disadvantage with just not having a quarterback. We'll just leave it at that.
Yeah.
Because even head coach situation, you can say is kind of, different than the other 3 teams in the division. Yeah. But what is success going to look like for you this year?
So for me, it's all about building a sustainable, team and program, something that's going to work long-term. And so it starts with some of our young players who have been injured coming back and continue their development. You and I talked this time last year, and I was very bullish on the Cardinals, and it was year 3 of the rebuild. And there was reason to be optimistic going into that point. They had made progress the past 2 years. And then a bunch of injuries happened and other things went wrong. And the wheels just fell off. They failed in grand fashion. Like they failed bigger than I thought they could have failed. It was one of the most disappointing seasons I've ever followed. And it wasn't the worst Cardinals. I think we had a little blurb.
I was like, wait, did I lose you?
Yeah, for a second. Okay. Maybe it's one of the storms.
I heard you say this isn't the worst Cardinals, and then it went out.
Yeah, it wasn't the worst Cardinals season ever, but it was most disappointing because the expectations were high. And we had a lot of young players who were injured, like Garrett Williams, a cornerback who's really good. And a number of other players, obviously James Conner got injured, and then running back Trey Benson and some other player. So a lot of injuries. So but there's some of these young players who I really do like on this roster that are kind of, that just need to kind of find their footing. So injured players coming back, especially young ones, and continuing to develop and kind of, take on the roles that they were starting to earn. That would be one thing, like seeing some of those players that, this is a guy, this is someone who's part of the future, he was injured, but we're seeing him back on track. That would be one thing. Mike LaFleur's system clicking, right? It might be inconsistent, but you want to see that the offensive line is coalescing and it's working. And the run game, if it's working right, the run game will be effective, right? They've got arguably, in my opinion, the best running back in the room overall in the NFL between Tyler Algier, James Conner, and Jeremiah Love, and then Trey Benson. If the offensive line's coalescing and the skill, and we've got really good skill position players, Michael Wilson, Marvin Harrison Jr., Trey McBride, and now Jeremiah Love. And listen, Jacoby Brissett is the ultimate bridge quarterback. And if he's your backup, you're in great situation. But if he's your starter, not so much. But he can sling it. I mean, he put up stats last year. They weren't winning, right? But he put up a lot of yards. And so, if the offense is clicking, they will be moving the ball. They might not win a lot of games. Maybe there'll be some mistakes here and there. But the skill position players, if you see everything clicking and the offense is not stagnating, right? To me, that's a plus. It shows you, okay, Mike LaFleur, there's something here, and the players are starting to get it. And on the defensive side, again, some young players are seeing them kind of take a step forward. I don't expect them to be, to take a step forward and be competent. And this is a bad division. So, a good division where, we're the bottom team in this division. And with our quarterback situation, I don't have any kind of delusions that we're going to make a playoff
Super Bowl or bust.
Right. But some people will think this is crazy. It's not crazy to think if the offense hits with all these great skill player positions we have, an improved offensive line, and Jacoby Brissett doing enough and getting the ball and letting the skill position players do the heavy lifting. It's not out of the realm possibility this team could win 6, 7, 8 games and surprise people. There's firepower.
That's fair.
We don't have our quarterback long-term, but Brissett is not incompetent as an NFL quarterback. And the defense, if the young players kind of, step up and injuries, kind of players are back from it and the defense is competent, in another division, that would be a 10-win season, right? But maybe 7 or 8 in the, it's not out of the realm of possibility. It's not my prediction, but a lot of people are predicting them to be the worst team in the league. And I don't know, with the skill position players we have, we might not be.
Well, and if you are, if this quarterback draft class in 2027 is as it's supposed to be, it might not be the worst thing in the world to be in that situation. So, that luxury is a weird luxury. You don't really want it as a sports fan, of your team, but then you kind of go, well, if we're going to be in the situation, might as well be advantageous for us. So,
but you don't want that to happen with the offense looking stacked, really bad.
Correct. You do not. So I always say this, if your offensive line is holding and it's very obvious that it's just quarterback play, it's a little bit easier to fix. But if you go and then the entire offense just looks like a mess, that's a different problem.
With an offensive head coach, we need them to look competent.
Yeah, fair enough. So what position group worries you the most as of right now?
Quarterback. Yeah. Our rookie Beck, I think he's long-term, you're looking at probably a long-term backup. I don't hate that, but we clearly don't have the guy in the building unless Beck ends up being more than people think.
Yeah, I will say, because I watch college football. He has all the things, so it's up to him. He has to fall in love with the process and the game and all of that, but so does everybody else. But so there's potential there, and I like where he's at. So so that
it's a perfect spot for him.
perfect spot. And he's not like, northeast, like in the cold and like so that could be helpful.
There's a universe where
okay.
he has the Brock Purdy arc, right?
Brock
Purdy was a guy who wasn't highly touted, plays well within the system, then develops, and Beck is a good fit for the system. So there's a universe where it works out. I'm not necessarily predicting that, but yeah.
Yeah, you never know. You never know. I just need you to be competent. Don't turn the ball over. Those were like my first thing is like, do you just not turn the ball over?
Mm-hmm.
But okay. So where has this team improved from last season? Like, where do you see the biggest jump from what you saw last season?
Offensive line. They brought in Samula from I'm just pronouncing him from your Steelers, right? And then drafted Basantis. Our right tackle situation is up in the air, but we did bring in a couple journeymen, Elijah Wilkins and Matt Pryor, who can hold it down, right? So I think that's probably going to improve, and it's going to need to be with the way we're going to be running the ball.
Yeah, well, that should be one thing that everybody is aware that they are going to try to do.
Yeah.
So, what will this team do better than most teams in the NFL?
Run the ball. I mean, this, when James Conner is either your second or third running back. Right.
Yeah.
And returning from injury, but Tyler Algier, and feel for that guy. He signed here to be a starter. And then
I just saw that story this morning where it was like,
not again.
Yeah. The same. He leaves a situation to hopefully be in a better situation, only for the team to draft the third round, like the third pick in the NFL draft as a running back.
Right.
Such is life.
But this is arguably the best in terms of depth running back room in the NFL, right? I mean, is there another room that has that three guys, any one of which could be a starting running back on another team, and a good one?
Not that I can. Not that not off the top of my mind. I was trying to think of two, honestly.
Yeah. Right.
I can barely get there. So, okay. Well, I have a question. Well, I want to do the fun round questions, but I have a question about how did Walter Nolan play last year? How was he with the team?
Really well when he was healthy. He missed some time injury, but he was electric. He was disruptive. He missed some time, but when he was in there, he was as advertised.
Okay. And then you guys took a chance on Will Johnson from Michigan. How did he end up? Because I know he had injury though. Whenever you all got him, did he remain injured, or did that ever?
He missed a little bit of time, but he played for us and had some really great games. He averaged with PFF grade kind of maybe low 60s, okay-ish, but he had some games where he had the highest grade of any defensive back in the week.
Okay,
so really promising.
Okay, cool. And that's that young talent you were thinking about, just seeing them improve this year. Okay, cool. I remembered those from last year, so I just wanted to double back and see, like, okay, what did that look like? So
when they were healthy, they looked good.
Okay, good. So let's do the fun round. So this is going to be kind of fun with you because, a team is a work in progress. So quarterback confidence from 1 to 5, 5 being the highest.
1.
Okay.
Maybe 2. Maybe 2. I mean, I guess I could say 2 because Brissett is the best bridge quarterback you could ask for. Veteran, smart, knows what he's doing. Have a guy back who is probably a long-term backup, but it's not, it could be worse. We could be starting a practice squad guy, but it's pretty low.
Okay. That's fair. Coaching staff trust level 1 to 5.
I'm going to say 3, and I may be being generous because he's just, young and unproven, but that archetype, the offensive-minded offensive coordinator coming from McVay, again, there's a good track record of success with that. So, optimistic.
So you like the reason why he got hired. So that's good.
Yeah.
Okay,
for sure.
Fair. Who do you think will carry the team, offense or defense?
I mean, offense, such as carrying the team is going to be for this team. I mean, is anyone really going to carry this team? But the running game,
you're like special teams is going to carry
exactly. Oh man. But if this team exceeds expectations, it's probably because that offensive line and that running game are so good that it sets up the quarterback for success. And listen, we have weapons. McBride, Michael Wilson, and then Marvin Harrison Jr. You know, he hasn't lived up to expectations, but he had 800 yards each last 2 seasons. If he takes a step forward, I mean, that can be an electric offense, even with that can elevate a Jacoby Brissett with those playmakers. And if you have an offensive line, right?
Yeah, no, I think that is fair. So the other question is, if you can trade drafts with any other team and with your team, so you take all of their draft picks, they take all of your draft picks, who would you pick?
There's only one right answer. It's the Raiders. They got the quarterback. I mean, even if you hated all the rest of the picks, you take that quarterback. And listen, you know, Mendoza, I think the comp a lot of people say is Jared Goff. He's not. This isn't necessarily, you know, the high end number 1 overall pick.
Interesting.
But like he's proud. You know, a lot of people think he's going to be a top 12 NFL quarterback if he kind of hits what's expected of him. But like in our situation, you take that. And you know, they got Tre'Don Stukes, the defensive back out of Arizona, who I liked. So we've got that nickel. We get that nickel corner too. The rest of the guys they took doesn't even matter, right? You get the quarterback, you would take that.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. And then if your team had a moment where you're like, this always happens, or here we go again, what is that moment for you all? Like, what is something that you always are kind of going, did we just really do that? We always do this.
It feels like in recent years, it's been the late season collapse. We had that every year under Cliff Kingsbury. Last year, it wasn't great out of the start, but like, would we go 1-11 in the last 12 games? So, you know, like we at least won 3 games, you know, in that first half or whatever. So that's probably
that's a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a good one. Yeah, and you're right. I remember there's been a couple of times where I feel like every year we've had this conversation. We usually start with, gosh, it started off so good. And then it just didn't quite. Yeah, it just didn't quite happen. All right. So my last question is, if you could send a message to the team's owner and team's GM, I started adding them. What would you say to them?
So I'm going to go specifically to the owner because I like the GM. I know some people have been down on him, but I think Monty Osfort, his process in terms of, at least prior to this draft, because again, this was a weird draft, but like taking premium positions early and not taking non-premium positions early, the way he approaches free agency, some people don't like it because he hasn't spent as much, but I think there's a lot of analytical evidence that suggests that you should use free agency to kind of, you know, find depth or guys who are serviceable. And if you're going to do upgrades in free agency, it's the non-premium positions like linebacker and such like that. Okay. But then you address the premium positions early in the draft. So he, like general manager, I think I like his approach.
He has a system. Okay.
He has a system that to me makes sense. Now he has to hit on more of the players and how much of that is coaching and the whole the whole system. But
the $1 million debate.
Right. You know, but let's talk about the owner, Michael Bidwell.
Okay.
His family's on the team forever, right? I mean, multiple generations. They are not the ownership group with the kind of money that like the Rams might have, right? Or the Broncos have that crazy Walmart money.
Yeah, Walmart.
Right?
Yeah.
And you know, if anyone who digs into this stuff, like maybe is familiar with the cash over cap conversation, where like that really helps teams like the Rams, what you can do with bonuses. And I won't, you know, I don't know. I'm not going to get into all that. I'm not sure I could explain it well if I tried. But you know, you've got the salary cap, but there are these other financial things. And then you've got teams that can afford good facilities. And the owner, you know, he, to some degree, I think the financial stuff, some of it is the team is where their money is from. So like they can't bankroll it from their other endeavors, like the Bronchies can.
A fun project.
Right. This is their business, right? Because it's a family, right? But like, you know, I thought about this, how to answer this question, because the one that most fans would say is tell him to sell the team. And most fans would love him to sell the team, but I thought about, okay, if I'm sending a message, like if I tell him that in a real world, he's not going to hear, he's going to be like, Okay,
Nope.
whatever. Right. Now, if I could make him do something that I would pick that. But to send a message, if I say that, he's just going to ignore that. Well, he's probably going to ignore anything I say. But a more realistic message, right, is fans aren't buying it. They think you're cheap. They think you don't really care about winning. They hear whispers about how you treat people inside the building, and they see through your attempts at PR spin on things. Instead of spending on facilities for players, you get the casitas and the improved Wi-Fi. And listen, those I'm not, you have to do improvements for the fan experience. I'm not saying you shouldn't do those things, but the perceptions fans have of him is not good, and they really have a perception of he is using those kind of band-aid things. How like when you work for a company,
I know exactly what you're saying.
And how about you just pay me a better wage? And like, well, how about we have a pizza party, right? It's like instead of a raise, let's have a pizza party. We'll spend $300 to feed everyone pizza instead of giving you the $5,000 more a year you deserve, right? It feels like that. So my message would be fans are buying. Like he's a smooth talker. He's a former federal prosecutor. He knows he's a good communicator. Like put him in front, like he's just a good orator, and he as an attorney he knows how to say the things.
Yeah,
but it rings hollow for fans. We're not buying it.
Okay, that's fair. Anything else you want to share? We'll end on you. As always, I appreciate having this conversation with you. I will put all of your information in the description box so anybody can find you on Twitter, because that's what I call it, and I'll always call it that, or Instagram, or wherever else. I will tag all of those things and leave them down there for them. But anything else you want to share that we didn't touch on, or that you were coming into this conversation that you wanted to make sure that you touched on?
I don't know if there's anything that came in this, but I'll just kind of circle back to something I think I talked about at the front end of this. As I get older, I'm kind of circumspect, and I look at things from a different lens, and, doing that, maybe it's my midlife, late life crisis. I don't know what it is. But like, think about like what's important. And, sports fandom is supposed to be something that brings joy or something positive to your life. Again, for me, it's a connection to my home city, our home state. It's a chance to connect with Cardinals fans. For some people, it's something you do with your kid, right? Go to a game. It's something you share with people. There's highs and lows, and it's more fun when your team's winning, no doubt. But there's this kind of, I think, rhetoric I hear from fans where they say, if your team doesn't make the Super Bowl or the playoffs, it's a wasted season. I'm like, if you're a player or coach or general manager, I get having that motivational perspective, because you need to have that competitive edge in those roles.
Right.
But as fans, being a fan is not supposed to be a competitive endeavor, right? I would never say that last season was a wasted year. As terrible as it went, I got to have a conversation with wonderful people like you. I got to hang out with other Cardinals fans. I got to commiserate with Cardinals fans. And my takeaway is just maybe a little more meta, but like, just enjoy sports the way you want to enjoy it. Let other people enjoy it, and just make sure, like, life's too short to get really all worked up about a team, right? Like have your moments where you're frustrated. Like, listen, the valleys allow you to enjoy the mountains. So I'm not saying don't be sad or upset when things go bad, but always come back to, what is this doing to bring good into my life? And it's connection with people, it's connection with place, and it's memories.
Yeah. I love that. Well said. Keep the main thing the main thing. Well, thank you. And I appreciate that. Sometimes we need to hear things like that. So thank you.
Yeah, of course.